This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. Dr. Doug Smith here. Glad you could join us for our show today. Once again, we're going to be running 10, 12, less than 15 minutes. And once again, we're going to be covering a specific piece of science. Now, remember, this is a place where you can come and hear the science. Okay, that's what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be going over the science. If you have ever felt opioid withdrawal, this is a place to come and learn about what actually happened to your body. If you've ever been told that you had opioid addiction or that you had opioid use disorder, or if you've ever been told that you had any type of a mental health diagnosis concerning the opioids, please come and listen to our science. And many of you, in fact, pretty much everybody I've talked to have given the opportunity, have said, you felt like there was something more going on than this was just something in your head. You felt like that your body had changed. You didn't want to take the opioids anymore. But every time you tried to quit, you got sick. And that sickness was unlike anything that you had ever experienced before. That sickness is so bad, it's so severe, you can't even explain to other people what you felt. Okay, the reason you can't explain to other people what you were experiencing is actually quite easy to understand. The reason you couldn't explain it well to other people is because, quite frankly, this has never happened before. It's never happened in the history of our species. It's never happened to humankind before. And frankly, the words to describe the horror of what our people experience when they go through opioid withdrawal, those words simply do not exist. They've never been created. We've never had words to describe a torture of that depth. Now, if you remember yesterday, okay, and if you don't, by the way, go back and watch the show. If you remember yesterday, we talked about a very specific uh, piece of science. It came to us from 1963. That's right. We're going all the way back. You see, from our point of view, the psychiatrists, the addiction specialists, these guys have made a mistake. And so in science, when you make a mistake, you go back to the foundations, you go back to the root, you go back to the beginning of the process, and you pick up the pieces and you begin to move forward and try to figure out where the mistake occurred. It's not a whole lot different than if you make a mistake building a house. You got to, if it's in the electrical system, you got to go back and go through it piece by piece, go back to the beginning of what you did. A lot of it's just common sense. So we're going back to the beginning. In 1963, I could go back to 58, I could go back to 41, but we're going to start at 1963, because in 1963, as you saw yesterday in the Gunne, Gunne, in the Gunne study, Gunne did a brilliant thing. Okay, a lot of what he did, we don't need to review it, but one thing that Gunne did that was brilliant was he took rats, 6 of them in fact, and got them, put them on morphine long enough to get them dependent upon the morphine, and then he withdrew the morphine. He took it away. He put them into withdrawal. Okay, and what he found was that after 2 days, 48 hours of withdrawal, the adrenal glands were pretty much half empty. Now, the adrenal glands are those little glands that sit on top of your kidneys and make adrenaline. So half the adrenaline was gone. Okay, where did it go? Gunne doesn't answer that. Remember, we're going back to Gunne because we're looking to first understand the right questions before we can understand what the right answer is. And with Gunne, we're trying to understand the right questions. So Gunne's raising the question, what happened to the adrenaline during opioid withdrawal? Now, for those of you who have experienced opioid withdrawal, go to Google, put in adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine, however you want to do it. We call it the catecholamines. As you can see in the title of what we're going to be reviewing today, it's catecholamines. Look up adrenaline and find out what the effects of adrenaline are. And I think you're going to find out that the effects of adrenaline are very similar to the part of the horror that you experienced during your episodes of opioid withdrawal. You'll see that what adrenaline does, dilated pupils, well, you had that. Sweating, okay, well, you had that. You were sweating profusely. Hair standing on end, well, you had that. Rapid heart rate, well, you had that. Okay, tremors, jitteriness, okay, well, you had that. Okay, feeling like something bad was going to happen, or feeling like you just needed to do something, you weren't sure what. Okay, well, you had that. Okay, those are the effects of adrenaline. In fact, there's a type of tumor called pheochromocytoma, pheochromocytoma, pheochromocytoma. You can look it up. And those are the very symptoms that people have with this very rare, 1 in a million, very rare type of tumor, pheochromocytoma, which is an adrenaline secreting tumor. So the effects of opioid withdrawal are very similar to the effects of an epinephrine adrenaline secreting tumor. Okay, so I think you'll find a lot of the symptoms that you found so unbearable were there with the adrenaline toxicity. So what Gunne found was half the adrenaline was gone, which raises the question, where did the adrenaline go? Was it not made? Was it made and it went somewhere? And so here we come to the study today of Kara and Brody. And that's the study you see on the screen right there in front of you. You can look it up, you can read about it. Okay, but what we learned in 1968 with the Kara and Brody study is that Kara and Brody found the metabolites of the adrenaline in the urine. Well, then that tells you what happened. Okay, the adrenaline was produced and it was secreted into the body. How do we know that it was secreted into the body? Because it got metabolized. Okay, that metabolism can take place in a number of places in the body. The liver, actually the cortex of the adrenal gland. There's little places all over the body where adrenaline can be broken down and metabolized. Okay, adrenaline only has a half-life of 2.5 minutes. It's very short acting. Your body doesn't want long-acting adrenaline. It's too dangerous. It'll kill you with a heart attack. So it's a very short-acting molecule. So the body's real fast about breaking it down. And the way your body breaks it down is well, one way is you stick a methyl group on it, carbon and 3 hydrogens, and that tells the kidney, throw it out. Okay, you ever thought about how the kidney knows what to throw into the urine? Okay, kidney doesn't have a brain. Okay, so what the kidney does is, if somewhere else in the body sticks one of these methyl groups on there and it gets the kidney goes, oh wow, it's got a methyl group on it, throw it out. Okay, when it throws it out, it's called metanephrine. Metanephrine. And that's what Kara and Brody found in the urine. They found a lot of metanephrine's. Okay, metanephrine, I've never known whether it was called metanephrine because meta being short for methyl, because that's what gets added on there is a methyl group, or if it was meta because it was metabolized epinephrine. I've never actually known. Never got the answer to that. Metanephrine, that's what Kara and Brody found in the urine, were the metanephrine's, metabolized adrenaline. Kara and Brody in 1968 found that the urine was full of metabolized adrenaline. That means it had been secreted by the adrenal gland and then metabolized in the body. How do we know? It was in the urine. Okay, so now we're still not getting answers. We're not to the point of getting answers yet. But what we are doing is we're clarifying the question. Okay, and if you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the right answer. Okay, it's that simple. You ask the wrong questions, you're going to get the wrong answers. So you got to be very careful when you're formulating the correct question. And that's what we're doing here. We're forming the right questions. And we're going back to the foundations of the science. We're going back to 1963. We're going back to 1968. And when we go back and look at the science, what do we find? Well, 1963, Gunne told us that after 48 hours of withdrawal, the adrenal glands were half empty. After 48 hours of withdrawal, the adrenal glands were half empty. Okay, what happened to the adrenaline? Well, in 1968, here come Kara Brody, and they say, oh, wow, the urine's full of metanephrine. That means that the epinephrine, the norepinephrine, the adrenaline, the catecholamines, whatever you want to call it, I have to call it adrenaline. That means that the adrenalines were metabolized, which means they got out into the body. How do we know? Well, if you don't get out into the body, it can't be metabolized. If you've got metanephrine in the urine, you had adrenaline in the body. There's no other way to get metanephrine into the urine. It's got to go out into the body. It's got to be metabolized. It's got to go to the kidney. It's got to be thrown into the urine. That's what kidneys do. They throw things into the urine. Okay. If we check your urine while you were in withdrawal, would your metanephrines be high? Yes, they would. Okay. If we surgically took you to the operating room after 2 days of withdrawal and cut you open and took out your adrenal gland, would it be half empty? Yeah, probably would. Okay. But this is why we use lab rats. Okay, so it's a little bit easier. It's easier to use lab rats. Hard to get humans to volunteer for these types of studies. But that's where we are, and that's where we're going to hold it for today. We're not answering any questions here, and that's a very important point. We're not answering any questions. What we're doing is we're raising and clarifying the questions. Okay, and the last thing I'll say today is this is kind of where the psychiatrists made their mistake. Okay, they didn't do this. Okay, this is how science works. Okay, you can't ignore doing this part of science. You can't ignore the fact that Gunne found that the adrenal glands were half empty after 48 hours. You can't ignore the fact that Akira Brody found that there were metabolites of adrenaline, the metanephrines, in the urine after withdrawal. You can't ignore that stuff, but the psychiatrists have ignored that. And that's how they ended up with this brain theory of addiction, the brain disease model of addiction, the dopamine theory of addiction. They completely ignored the foundations of the science, and they ended up making a mistake, and that mistake harmed a lot of people. So we're going to hold there today. We'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow is the first time we're going to start answering some questions. We're going to begin looking at a brilliant study tomorrow from 1990 by Dell and his team. Absolutely brilliant. Once again, thank you guys. Please like us, subscribe, post this video everywhere on social media that you can. Okay, people have got to hear the truth, and that's what you'll get at this podcast. You'll get the truth. My name is Dr. Doug Smith, and I thank you for your time. Thank you.